My name is Eva Carter, I'm 22 now. But this story doesn't start in a courtroom. It starts in a kitchen that always smelled like burnt coffee and tension. I grew up in a small house just outside Columbus, Ohio. Nothing fancy. Peeling paint near the windows, a fridge that hummed too loud at night, and walls thin enough that you could hear every argument like it was happening inside your chest. My dad worked in logistics. My mom, she bounced between jobs, retail mostly. They weren't poor, but they always acted like we were one missed payment away from disaster. At least that's what they told me. But here's the thing. They never struggled when it came to themselves. New phones every year, weekend getaways. My mom had this thing for designer bags, always said they were investments. I didn't question it. I was just a kid. Until the day I turned 14. It was my birthday. No cake. No candles. Just a folded piece of paper sitting on the kitchen table. I remember thinking it was a card. I even smiled when I picked it up. God, I wish I hadn't. Because when I opened it, it wasn't a card. It was a contract. I laughed at first. I actually thought it was a joke. Very funny, I said, looking at my dad. He didn't laugh. My mom didn't even look up from her coffee. That's when my stomach dropped. You're old enough now, my dad said, like he was explaining something completely normal. Time to learn responsibility. I looked back down at the papers. Monthly rent, $200. Utilities, $50. Groceries, $100. Total, $350. I felt my throat tighten. I don't have a job, I said, my voice barely holding together. You wills, my mom replied flatly. I remember gripping the edge of the table so hard my fingers went numb. Wait, you're serious? My dad leaned forward. You live here, you eat here, you use electricity, you think that's free. I stared at him. He wasn't angry. He was calm. That's what made it worse. Other kids don't pay rent, I whispered. My mom finally looked at me. And other kids grow up entitled. That's when something inside me shifted. Not broke. Not yet. But something definitely cracked. I got my first job 2 weeks later. A small grocery store 3 blocks from our house. Stocking shelves. $8.25 an hour. I lied about my age. The manager didn't ask too many questions. I worked after school, weekends, holidays. While my friends were hanging out, going to movies, living their teenage lives. I was counting hours. Every dollar mattered. Because the first time I came home short, I learned what consequences meant in my parents' world. It was the end of my first month. I had $280, not $350. I walked into the kitchen already rehearsing my apology. I'll make up the rest next week, I said quickly. My dad didn't even look at the money. A late fee, he said. My stomach dropped. Oh, what? $50. I felt my chest tighten. That's not fair. His hand slammed on the table. Life isn't fair, Eva. My mom just sat there sipping her coffee. Like this was normal. Like I was just another bill. That night they turned off the Wi-Fi. Then my phone. Then this is the part I'll never forget. They removed my bedroom door. Privacy is a privilege, my dad said. I stood there in the hallway frozen. 14 years old. And suddenly, I wasn't their daughter anymore. I was a tenant who had fallen behind on rent. It didn't stop there. Every month, the rules got stricter. Miss a payment, a penalty, a complain, a penalty. Get a lower grade in school. Clearly, you're not managing your priorities, another $50. I started keeping everything. Every receipt, every payment, every message. At first, I didn't even know why. It just felt important. Like some part of me knew. One day, I'd need proof that this wasn't normal. By 15, I was working 2 jobs, the grocery store and a diner. I barely slept. My grades dropped. Not that they cared. As long as I paid. That was all that mattered. I remember one night. I came home at 11:30 p.m. Exhausted. My feet hurt. My hands smelled like grease and detergent. I walked into the kitchen and saw my mom scrolling through her phone. "Where's dinner?" I asked. She didn't even look up. "You didn't pay your grocery share this week." I stood there, hungry, shaking. "You're serious?" She shrugged. "Actions have consequences." That was the first time I went to bed without eating. Not because we didn't have food, but because I couldn't afford to pay for it. That night I didn't cry. I just stared at the ceiling and thought, what kind of parents do this? But the worst part, I started to believe them. That this was normal. That I was lucky. That I needed to earn my place in my own homes. It messes with your head when the people who are supposed to protect you turn everything into a transaction. Love becomes conditional. Safety becomes rented. And you become replaceable. Then came the day everything changed. I was 16, and I found something I was never supposed to see. It was a Saturday. My parents were out. I was cleaning because, yes, that was also part of my responsibilities. I went into their room to grab the vacuums. And that's when I saw it. An open folder on the desk. I wasn't trying to snoop, but the number caught my eye. $87,000. I froze. I stepped closer. Slowly. Like the papers might disappear if I moved too fast. Bank statements. Multiple accounts. Savings. Investments. All in my parents' names. I flipped through them. Page after page. Numbers I had never seen in my life. Not even close. They weren't struggling. Not even a little. They were comfortable. More than comfortable. My hands started shaking. Because suddenly, everything they had told me, every lecture, every punishment, every lesson about responsibility, it all felt like a lie. I stood there in that room staring at those numbers. And for the first time, I didn't feel confused. I felt something else. Something sharp. Something clear. Something dangerous. I felt angry. And that's when I started paying attention. Really paying attention. Not just surviving. Not just obeying. But watching. Listening. Recording. Collecting. Because deep down, I knew something wasn't right. And I was done being blind. I didn't confront them. Not yet. No, I did something smarter. I played along. I kept paying. Kept working. Kept acting like their system was working. But behind the scenes, I was building something. Piece by piece. Document by document. Truth by truth. Because I had a feeling. One day, this was all going to explode. And when it did, I wanted to make sure I was ready. I just didn't know how big that explosion would be, or how many people it would take down with it. For the next 2 years, I became two different people. At school, I was quiet Eva, the girl who always looked tired, the girl who never came to parties, the girl who wore the same black hoodie almost every day because buying new clothes meant falling behind on rent. But at home, I was something else. I was a watcher, a collector, a girl with a shoebox hidden under loose carpet in the back of her closet. Inside that shoebox, I kept everything. Receipts from grocery payments, screenshots of text messages, photos of handwritten bills my dad taped to my door, bank deposit slips, Notes my mom wrote in red pen saying things like, Eva owes $75 late fee. Eva short on utilities. Eva must pay before eating shared groceries. Every time they gave me a new house bill, I smiled, nodded, and saved it. Because by then, I knew. One day, somebody outside that house was going to ask me what happened. And when they did, I wasn't going to sound like a dramatic daughter. I was going to sound like evidence. Background music shifts, quiet 10 strings. The strange thing about abuse is that it doesn't always look like shouting. Sometimes it looks like a parent calmly sliding a receipt across the table. Sometimes it sounds like, we're teaching you responsibility. Sometimes it feels like standing in front of a full refrigerator with an empty stomach, knowing you are not allowed to eat because you didn't pay your grocery share. And the worst part is, you start explaining it for them. You start saying, maybe they're right. Maybe I am lazy. Maybe this is love. Maybe parents are supposed to make life hurt so the world hurts less later. That's what I told myself. Until my 18th birthday. That was the day they raised the rent. I came home from my diner shift around midnight. My shirt smelled like fried onions. My shoes were soaked from walking through rain because my parents said rides were extra gas money. There was an envelope on my pillow. My bedroom door had been returned by then, but only after I paid a privacy restoration fee. I opened the envelope. Inside was another paper. Monthly rent, $650. Utilities, $120. Groceries, $250. Laundry access, $40. House maintenance, $75. Total, $1,135. I stared at it for so long the numbers blurred. Then I laughed. Not because it was funny. Because something inside me had no other sound left. My mom appeared in the doorway. You're an adult now, she said. Adult. That word hit me harder than it should have. Because they had made me pay like an adult since I was 14. But somehow, I only became an adult when they wanted more. I looked at her and said, I can't pay this. She tilted her head. Then move out. A silence moment. Just like that. No hesitation. No sadness. No fear for where I would go. Just move out. My dad came behind her, arms crossed, face cold. You've had 4 years to prepare, he said. Don't act helpless now. I wanted to scream. 4 years. 4 years of paying them every dollar I had. 4 years of choosing between school supplies and food. 4 years of working until my hands cracked. And they called that preparations. My throat burned. But I didn't scream. I just folded the paper slowly and put it in my drawer. Then I looked at them and said, okay. My mom blinked. Okay. I nodded. I'll move out. For the first time in years. They looked surprised. Background music, low dramatic pulse. Because they expected me to beg. They expected panic. They expected me to promise more shifts, more money, more obedience. But I was done. Not loudly. Not dramatically. Just done. I moved out 3 weeks later. Not into a nice apartment. Not into some perfect new life. I rented a tiny room from an older woman named Mrs. Alvarez who lived near the diner. The room had faded yellow wallpaper, one small window, and a mattress that sank in the middle. But it had something my parents' house never had. Please. The first night there, I sat on the floor with a gas station sandwich in my hand and cried so hard I couldn't eat. Not because I was sad. Because no one charged me for sitting there. No one timed my shower. No one counted how many slices of bread I used. No one knocked on my door demanding money. I was poor. I was exhausted. But I was free. Or at least, I thought I was. 2 months after I moved out, I got a letter. It came in a plain white envelope. No return address. Inside was a notice from a collection agency. Amount owed $8,740. Creditor Carter household agreement. My hands went cold. At first, I thought it was fake. A mistake. Some scam. Then I saw the attached copy. A contract. The same kind they gave me at 14. Except this one had my signature on it. My stomach dropped. Because I had never signed that. Not once. My parents had created a debt in my names. A fake debt. For unpaid rent, late fees, food costs, utilities, property damage, and emotional hardship caused to household providers. I read that line 3 times. Emotional hardship. To them. Camera close-up feeling, Eva's fingers gripping the paper. I couldn't breathe. I called my mom. She answered on the 3rd ring. Before I could even speak, she said, "So you got it." Her voice was calm, almost pleased. I whispered, "What did you do?" Oh, she sighed. "Eva, actions have consequences." There it was again. That sentence. The one they had used like a weapon my whole teenage life. I said, "You forged my signature." My mom's voice sharpened. "Careful, you don't want to make accusations you can't prove." My dad took the phone from her. His voice came through deeper, colder. "You owe us money, you always have." I was a child, I said. "You were old enough to work." I was 14. "And now you're 18, so pay." I felt something inside me go still. Not calm. Still, like a lake before a storm. I said, "Take me to court then." There was a pause. A small one. But I heard it. Then my dad laughed. "You really think a judge will believe you over your own parents?" I looked at the collection letter in my hand. Then at the shoebox beside my bed. And for the first time, I smiled. "No," I said softly, "I think he'll believe the bank records." Background music shifts, dramatic rise. My dad stopped laughing. And that silence told me everything. The court date was set for March 17th. I remember because it rained that mornings. Cold, ugly rain that turned the sidewalks dark. I wore a navy blue blazer I bought from a thrift store for $9. The sleeves were a little too short. My shoes pinched. My stomach was empty because I couldn't eat. But inside my bag, I had 4 years of proof. 4 years of my childhood reduced to paper. Every payment, every threat, every rent notice, every late fee, every bank withdrawal, every transfer, every cruel little note they thought I'd throw away. My parents walked into the courthouse like they were attending a business meeting. My mother wore pearls. My father wore a gray suit. They didn't look nervous. They looked annoyed, like I had inconvenienced them. When my mom saw me, she smiled. Not lovingly, not warmly, just enough to remind me she still thought she had control. She walked closer and whispered, "You're embarrassing yourself." I looked at her, really looked at her, at the smooth makeup, the polished nails, the woman who had watched her child go hungry over grocery money. And I said, "No, Mom, I'm finally telling the truth." Her smile disappeared. A silence moment. That was the first time I saw fear in her eyes. Only for a second. But it was there, and I held on to it. Inside the courtroom, my parents' attorney made it sound simple. He said I had lived at home after turning 18. He said I had agreed to contribute financially. He said my parents had been generous enough to let me remain under their roof despite repeated failure to meet obligations. Repeated failure. I almost laughed. Then he submitted the contract. The fake one. The one with my forged signature. My chest tightened. Because even when you know the truth, watching a lie become official on paper is terrifying. Then it was my turn. I stood up. My legs felt weak. The judge looked at me and said, "Ms. Carter, do you dispute this debt?" My mouth went dry. "Yes, Your Honor." "On what grounds?" I took a breath. My hands shook as I opened my folder. Because the debt is based on years of payments, my parents forced me to make starting when I was 14, and because the contract they submitted was not signed by me. My mother made a soft sound behind me, like a laugh. The judge looked up. 14. Yes, Your Honor." The room shifted. Not loudly, but I felt it. Even the clerk looked up. My parents' attorney stood quickly. "Your Honor, my clients deny any improper conduct. They encourage their daughter to learn financial responsibility." The judge looked at him. "By charging rent to a minor." The attorney paused, then said, "We believe the term rent is being emotionally exaggerated." Emotionally exaggerated. That phrase almost broke me, because that was my whole life to them. Exaggeration, drama, disrespect. The judge turned back to me. "Do you have documentation?" I swallowed. Then I placed the first stack on the table. "Oh, yes. Bank records. 4 years. From age 14 to 18. Every month, money left my account and went directly to either my mother or father. $350. $400. $475. $600. Late fees. Grocery fees. Utility fees. Even a payment labeled door returns." The judge flipped through them. Slowly, his face changed with every page. Then I gave him the notes. My dad's handwriting. My mom's text. A screenshot from when I was 15. "Mom, no grocery payment means no dinner. That is how real life works." Another one. "Dad, if rent is late again, we remove your door and Wi-Fi." Another. "Mom, stop crying. Tenants do not cry when rent is due." The judge stopped moving. He stared at that one for a long time. Then he took off his glasses. And that's when he asked, "You were 14. I nodded. "Yes, Your Honor." My voice cracked. "I was 14. Silence. The courtroom felt frozen. My parents didn't move. Their attorney looked down at his table. And for the first time in my life, nobody told me I was being dramatic. Nobody told me I misunderstood. Nobody told me to be grateful. The truth was sitting there in black and white, and everyone could see it. But then came the moment I didn't expect. The judge asked where the money came from. I said I worked. The grocery store. The diner. Babysitting. Cleaning houses. Anything I could get. He asked if my parents knew. I looked at them, then back at the judge. They arranged some of it. The judge's expression hardened. My father suddenly sat straighter. My mother's lips parted. Their attorney whispered something quickly. The judge leaned forward. "Ms. Carter, what do you mean by arranged?" And that was when the whole case changed. Because the rent was only the beginning. The bank records showed payments. But my next folder showed something worse. Much worse. I opened it slowly. My hands were no longer shaking. And I said, "My parents didn't just take my money, Your Honor." I looked directly at them. They built my entire childhood around making sure I earned it for them. My mother whispered, "Eva, stop." But I didn't. Not this time. I pulled out the second stack. Work schedules, text messages, paycheck photos, and one document I had found buried in my father's email when I was 17. A document titled, "Eva Monthly Contribution Plans." The judge reached for it. My dad's face went pale. And in that second, I knew. They weren't scared of the rent anymore. They were scared of what came after it. Because that document didn't just prove they charged me, it proved they planned it. Before I even turned 14. The moment the judge picked up that document, everything changed. You could feel it. Not just in the air, but in the way my parents suddenly stopped breathing normally. My dad's jaw tightened. My mom's fingers curled around her purse like she was holding onto the last bit of control she had left. And me. I stood there completely still. Because this was the part I had been building toward for years. Not revenge. Not yet. Truth. The judge adjusted the paper in his hands. His eyes moved line by line. Slowly. Carefully. Like he didn't trust what he was reading. Then he said it out loud. Eva monthly contribution plan drafted May 3rd, 2017. May 3rd. I hadn't even turned 14 yet. I felt my throat tighten, but I didn't look away. The judge kept reading. Projected income streams, part-time retail, food service, neighborhood services. He paused, then flipped the page. Expected monthly contribution beginning at age 14, $300, 400. Gradual increase based on compliance and attitude. Compliance and attitude. I watched the courtroom react in small ways. A clerk shifting in her seat. Someone in the back exhaling too loudly. My parents' attorney slowly lowering his pen. The judge continued. Penalty structure, late fees, restriction of privileges, controlled access to food and utilities to enforce payment behavior. My chest felt like it was caving in. Not because I didn't know this existed, but because hearing it out loud made it real in a way I had spent years trying to survive without fully understanding. My entire childhood had been planned like a business model. My dad suddenly stood up. Your Honor, this is being taken out of context. The judge didn't look at him. Sit down. The word landed like a hammer. My dad hesitated, then slowly sat. For the first time, he didn't look in control. The judge looked at me again. Ms. Carter, how did you obtain this document? I swallowed. I found it in my father's email when I was 17. My mom shook her head quickly. That's an invasion of privacy. The judge raised his hand. Ma'am, you can speak when it's your turn. I continued. I didn't understand it at first. I thought maybe it was just notes, but then I started connecting it with everything they had been doing. My voice dropped slightly. The rent, the penalties, the food restrictions. I paused, then said quietly, it matched everything. The judge leaned back in his chair. He looked at the document again, then at my parents, then back at me. Did your parents ever explain this plan to you? I shook my head. No, Your Honor. They just started charging me. That silence again. Heavier this time. Because now it wasn't just about money. It was about intention. My parents' attorney stood again, this time slower. Your Honor, while this document may appear concerning, my clients maintain that their actions were intended to instill discipline and prepare their daughter for adulthood. Discipline. That word almost made me laugh. But I stayed still. Because I knew. This wasn't the moment to react. This was the moment to let the truth speak. The judge tapped the paper lightly. Controlled access to food is not discipline. His voice was calm. But there was something underneath it now. Something sharper. Charging rent to a minor under threat of deprivation is not preparation for adulthood. He looked directly at my parents. It raises serious legal concerns. My mom's face went pale. My dad shifted in his seat again like he couldn't get comfortable. Because suddenly, this wasn't just a civil dispute anymore. And that's when the judge said something I didn't expect. Ms. Carter, do you have any additional documentation? I nodded. Yes, Your Honor. My hands moved automatically. I reached into my bag and pulled out the third folder. This one was thicker, heavier, because this one was the part I had almost been too scared to include. I placed it on the table. These are communications and payment records showing not just what I paid, but how they enforced it. The judge opened it. The first page was a printed text conversation. Age 15. Me, can I eat something? I'll pay tomorrow. Mom, no payment equals no food. Stop asking. The next one. Age 16. Dad, your rent is late. Door comes off tonight. Another. Age 17. Mom, if you can't afford to live here, you shouldn't be here. The judge flipped through them faster now. Page after page. Each one worse than the last. Then he stopped on one. His eyes narrowed. He read it again. Then once more. Slowly. Like he needed to be sure. Then he looked up. Ms. Carter, what is this? My throat tightened. Because I knew exactly which one he was holding. The message I had almost deleted. The one that kept me up at night. I said quietly, that was the day I got sick. I was 16. Fever. Head pounding. I could barely stand. I texted my mom from my room. Can you bring me something? I feel really bad. She replied 5 minutes later. You still owe $80 from last week. I stared at the screen. My vision blurred. I'll pay after my shift tomorrow. I just need something now. There was a pause. Then, no payment equals no service. Service? That word. Like I was a customer. Not her daughter. I didn't eat that day. Or the next. I went to work anyway. Because if I didn't, the penalties would stack. The judge slowly placed the paper down. His jaw tightened. He looked at my parents again. And this time, there was no neutrality left in his expression. Only something colder. My dad stood up again, his voice louder now. This is ridiculous, she's twisting everything. Sit down. This time, the judge didn't raise his voice. But it didn't need to be loud. My dad sat. Immediately. My mom spoke next. Her voice softer. Almost pleading. We were trying to teach her how hard life is. The judge looked at her. By making it harder than necessary. She didn't answer. And that's when everything finally clicked. Not just for the judge, but for everyone in that room. This wasn't about teaching. It wasn't about discipline. It wasn't about responsibility. It was control. Structured, planned, enforced control. Built on money. And fear. The judge closed the folder slowly. Then folded his hands. Based on the documentation presented. He paused. And in that pause, I felt my heartbeat in my ears. Loud, heavy, like it was trying to break through my chest. This court finds the debt claim invalid. My breath caught, and raises serious concerns regarding the treatment of a minor. My mom inhaled sharply. My dad didn't move. This matter may require further review beyond this proceeding. Background music, low rise, something bigger coming. Further review. That phrase echoed in my head. Because I knew what it meant. This wasn't over. Not even close. The judge looked at me one last time. Ms. Carter, you did the right thing bringing this forward. I nodded, but I couldn't speak. Because something inside me was finally breaking. Not from fear. Not from pain. But from the weight of holding all of this in for so long. As we stood to leave, my mom grabbed my arms. Hard. Her nails dug into my skin. You've destroyed this family. I looked at her. Really looked at her. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel small. I didn't feel guilty. I didn't feel scared. I felt clear. No, I said quietly. Oh, you did. I walked out of that courtroom, not knowing what would happen next, not knowing how far this would go, but knowing one thing for sure. The truth was out. And once the truth is out, it doesn't go back in. What I didn't know yet was that the next step wouldn't be mine, because someone else had been watching. Someone who had seen the documents, heard the testimony, and decided this wasn't just a family issue anymore. It was something bigger, something legal, something serious. 3 days later, I got a call from an investigator, and the first thing he said was, "Eva, we need to talk about your parents." 3 days after the court hearings, my phone rang at exactly 9:12 a.m. Unknown number. For a second, I almost didn't pick up. Because when you grow up like I did, unknown numbers usually mean problems. More bills, more pressure, more consequences. But something told me this one was different. I answered, "Hello." There was a pause on the other end. Then a calm, measured voice said, "Is this Eva Carter?" My grip tightened on the phone. "Oh, yes. This is Daniel Reeves. I'm calling from the county investigator's office." I froze. Not physically, but mentally. Because in that moment, everything I had pushed out into the open in that courtroom suddenly came back. Louder, bigger, real. Okay," I said, my voice unsteady. "Is something wrong?" There was a brief silence. Then, "We've reviewed the materials presented in your case. We'd like to ask you a few questions regarding your parents' conduct over the past several years." Conduct. Such a clean word. For something so ugly. I swallowed. Am I in trouble? "No," he said immediately. "You're not in any trouble, but what you shared raises concerns that go beyond a civil dispute." Beyond. That word hit differently. Because deep down, I knew this was never just about rent. We scheduled a meeting that afternoon at a small government office downtown. Nothing dramatic. No flashing lights. No interrogation rooms like in movies. Just a quiet space with beige walls, a metal desk, and a man in his 40s who looked like he'd seen too many stories like mine. Daniel Reeves. He shook my hand firmly. "Thank you for coming in, Eva." His tone wasn't cold, but it wasn't overly warm either. It was steady, professional, like he needed to stay grounded while everything else was. I sat down across from him. My hands rested in my lap, fingers intertwined so tightly they hurt. Because even though I had already told the truth once, this felt different. This felt like something that couldn't be undone. He started simple. "Can you walk me through when the payments began?" I nodded slowly. 14. He wrote something down. And before that, any indication this would happen. I hesitated, then remembered the document. The plan. "Yes," I said, "they had it planned before my birthday. I found the file later." He looked up. "Planned?" "Oh, yes." I watched his pen pause for just a second, then continue writing. For the next hour, I told him everything. Not just the payments, not just the penalties, but the feeling of it, the structure, the control, the way my entire life had been shaped around earning money for them. How every decision I made was tied to whether I could afford to exist in my own home. How hunger wasn't an accident. It was a consequence. A tool. He didn't interrupt much. Just ask small questions here and there. "Did they ever physically harm you?" "No." "Did they restrict access to education?" "No, but they didn't care if I struggled." "Did they ever take your earnings directly?" "Oh, yes." That made him look up again. How? "They had access to my account at first, then they made me transfer everything monthly." He leaned back slightly. "And if you did?" I didn't answer right away because saying it out loud still felt strange. They punished me. What kind of punishment? I looked at the table, then said, they controlled what I had access to: food, privacy, basic things. He nodded slowly, like he had heard something similar before, but maybe not exactly like this. Then he asked something I wasn't expecting. Eva, did they ever benefit from any financial assistance programs on your behalf? I frowned slightly. I don't think so. Why? He flipped through some papers. Because based on the timeline you've given, there are some inconsistencies we're looking into. Inconsistencies. That word stuck in my head. What kind? He hesitated, just for a second, then said, we'll need to verify more before discussing details, but it's possible your parents may have reported you as financially dependent while simultaneously collecting money from you. My chest tightened. That's illegal, right? He met my eyes. That can be. Background music, slow tension rising again. Something cold moved through me. Because suddenly, this wasn't just about what they did to me directly. It was about what they might have been doing behind the scenes. Things I never saw. Things I never questioned. Because I was too busy surviving. He closed the file gently. For now, I'd like you to provide copies of everything you have: bank statements, messages, documents, anything. I nodded. I already organized them. Of course I had. That was the only way I knew how to stay in control. Even when I had none. When I left that office, the world felt different. Not better. Not worse. Just bigger. Like my story wasn't just mine anymore. Like it had crossed some invisible lines. And now it belonged to something else. Something official. That night I couldn't sleep. I lay on the thin mattress in Mrs. Alvarez's house, staring at the ceiling again. Just like I used to at 14. But this time, the thoughts were different. Back then I asked, what kind of parents do this? Now I was asking, what else did they do? The answer came faster than I expected. 2 days later, another call. Same number. I answered immediately. Eva, Daniel said, his voice tighter this time, we need you to come in again. My stomach dropped. What happened? There was a pause. Longer this time. Then, we found something in your parents' financial records. Heartbeat sound begins again, faster now. What kind of something? Another pause. Then he said, they weren't just taking money from you. My breath caught. What? They were reporting it. I sat up slowly. Reporting it. Oh yes. His voice lowered slightly. As income. I couldn't process that. Income, like legally. Like they were running a household contribution system, structured, documented, claimed. My mind raced. But I was a minor. As I know. And they were charging me. As I know. And then reporting it as income. Oh yes. Background music, sharp tension spike. I felt sick. Not just angry. Not just hurt. Sick. Because suddenly, everything made sense in a way that made it worse. The structure. The planning. The documentation. It wasn't just control. It was strategy. Eva, Daniel continued, were expanding the investigation. The word hit hard. Investigation. Not inquiry. Not review. Investigation. That means we may need you to formally testify again. I swallowed. Against them. Oh yes. Silence moment. I looked around my small room. At the peeling paint. The quiet. The life I had barely started rebuilding. And for a second, I felt that old fear again. The one that said, stay quiet. Don't push. Don't make it worse. But then another voice cut through it. stronger, clearer. The voice that had been growing ever since I found that first document. You already survived the worst part. I took a breath and said, okay. The next few weeks felt like a blur. Meetings, paperwork, more questions, more details, more things I had buried slowly being brought back up. But this time, I wasn't alone, and that made all the difference. Then came the moment I wasn't ready for. The moment everything shifted again. I was called in for a final review meeting. Daniel was there, and another woman's. Older, sharp eyes, focused. She introduced herself. Assistant District Attorney. My chest tightened, because that meant one thing. This wasn't just an investigation anymore. She sat down across from me, opened a file, and said, Eva, based on the evidence we've gathered, we're considering filing charges. Charges. The word echoed in my head. Loud, heavy, real, against my parents. She nodded. Oh, yes. Background music fades into deep, slow pulse. I didn't speak. I couldn't. Because this was it. The line you don't come back from. The moment where truth turns into consequence. She continued. We believe there may be grounds for multiple violations, including financial exploitation of a minor and fraudulent reporting. My hands started shaking again. Not from fear. Not entirely. But from the weight of it. Because this wasn't just about proving I was right anymore. This was about what happened next. She looked at me carefully. This process won't be easy, it may take time, and it will require your cooperation. I nodded slowly. I understand. She closed the file, then said something I'll never forget. But Eva, based on what we've seen, you already did the hardest part. That night, I sat alone again. A same room, a same ceiling, but everything felt different. Because now, this wasn't just my story. It was a case. And somewhere out there, my parents were about to realize this wasn't over. Not even close. The next morning, there was a knock on their door. And it wasn't me. The knock on their door came at 7:43 a.m. I know that because Daniel told me later. 3 officers, 1 investigator, a warrant, no warning, no conversation. Just, Mr. and Mrs. Carter, we need to speak with you. I wasn't there to see it, but somehow, I could picture it perfectly. My mom opening the door in her robes. My dad stepping in behind her, already irritated, already defensive. Because for years, they had lived in a world where they controlled the narrative, where they decided what was right, where consequences only existed for me. That morning, that changed. Daniel sat across from me 2 days later and explained everything. They didn't expect it, he said simply. Of course they didn't. People like my parents never do. Because they don't see what they're doing as wrong. They see it as justified, necessary, even smart. What happened? I asked quietly. He leaned back slightly. They were cooperative at first, confident. Your father insisted everything was structured parenting. Your mother said it was about teaching discipline. I closed my eyes briefly. The same words, the same script, even now. But then we showed them the records, he continued. What records? He looked at me. The ones they didn't know we had yet. My stomach tightened, because I knew what that meant. Bank activity beyond what you submitted, Daniel said. Tax filings, reported income streams, documentation tied to what they labeled as household contributions. I felt my chest tighten again. Because now, this wasn't just about me proving my story. This was about everything they had built behind it. They categorized your payments, he said. How? Like revenue. That word hit harder than anything else. Revenue. Not help. Not contribution. Not family support. Revenue. They tracked it monthly, he continued, adjusted expectations, increased rates based on your age and income potential. My throat burned. Because suddenly, every increase, every new charge, every penalty wasn't random. It was calculated. And then I asked. Daniel paused. They tried to explain it away. Of course they did. That's what they always did. Turn it into a lesson. Turn it into responsibility. Turn it into something that sounded reasonable enough until you looked closer. What changed? I asked. He looked at me carefully. Your age. I frowned. What do you mean? They didn't just start when you were 14. Silence. Everything inside me stopped. What? They had records of transactions before that. My mind went blank. No, that's not possible. I didn't even have a job before 14. I know, he said. So where would the money come from? He didn't answer right away. And that silence was worse than anything he could have said. Then, they opened an account in your name when you were 12. A heartbeat sudden sharp. I stared at him. What? They were depositing money into it, small amounts, labeling it as earned. I shook my head slowly. That doesn't make sense. It didn't at first, he said, until we looked closer. My hands started shaking again. Closer how? They were creating a financial history. I couldn't breathe. A history. Yes, one that would justify larger contributions later. My chest felt like it was collapsing. You're saying they planned this even earlier? He nodded. Oh yes, 12. I tried to remember what I was doing at 12. School, homework, watching TV. Still believing my parents loved me without conditions. And somewhere in the background, they were building a system. A system that would slowly turn me into a source of income. I pressed my palms against my legs to stop them from shaking. Why? The question came out small, almost childlike. Because no matter how much time passes, some questions never grow up. Daniel didn't answer immediately. Because maybe there isn't a good answer. But then he said something that stayed with me. Control can look like many things. Sometimes it looks like money. I sat there in silence. Because suddenly, everything made sense in a way I never wanted it to. The planning, the structure, the escalation, the lack of emotion. It wasn't just about teaching me something. It was about shaping me into something. Something predictable. Something manageable. Something profitable. And there's more, he said. Of course there was. There's always more when something like this starts to unravel. They claimed certain financial benefits tied to your dependency status, he explained, while also reporting your contributions as independent income. I frowned. That's contradictory. Oh, yes, and illegal. In many cases, yes. I leaned back in my chair. My head felt heavy. Because this wasn't just one thing anymore. It wasn't just rent. It wasn't just control. It was layers, built on top of each other. Carefully, deliberately. What happens now? I asked. Daniel exhaled slowly. The case moves forward. The case, not the situation, not the issue. The case. Will they be arrested? I asked. He didn't answer directly. Procedures will follow the evidence. That was his way of saying, yes, but not yet. I left that office feeling numb, not relieved, not satisfied, just empty. Because when the truth finally comes out, it doesn't always feel like victory. Sometimes it just feels like loss. That night I didn't cry. I didn't think. I just sat by the window, watching the streetlights flicker on one by one. And for the first time, I didn't feel like I was looking back. I felt like I was standing at the edge of something new, something uncertain, something that couldn't be undone. 3 days later, the official notice was filed. Formal charges were being prepared. And suddenly, my story wasn't private anymore. A local reporter reached out. Then another. Then another. Would you be willing to share your experience? Can you comment on the allegations? How long did this go on? I ignored them all. Because this wasn't a story to me. It was my life. But then, something unexpected happened. Mrs. Alvarez knocked on my door. I opened it slowly. She stood there holding her phone. Eva, she said softly, you need to say this. Background music, quiet tension, something shifting again. I took the phone, looked at the screen, and froze. Because it wasn't a news article. It wasn't a headline. It was a message. From someone I didn't recognize. I saw what's happening, you're not the only ones. Silence. My fingers tightened around the phone. What is this? I whispered. Mrs. Alvarez shook her head slowly. I don't know, but I think you're about to find out. I stared at the message again. Read it twice. 3 times. You're not the only ones. And in that moment, I realized something that made my stomach drop. Something bigger than everything that had already happened. Something worse than anything I had imagined. What if this wasn't just my story? What if there were others? I read the message again. You're not the only ones. 4 words. Simple, but they hit harder than anything that had happened so far. Because until that moment, I thought this was my story. My parents, my childhood, my nightmare. But now, there was a possibility I hadn't even considered. What if this wasn't unique? I looked up at Mrs. Alvarez. Who sent this? She shook her head. It came through a local community page. Someone tagged the news coverage, then this person replied under it. My heart started beating faster. Did they say anything else? She handed me the phone again. There's more. I scrolled. My fingers felt cold. The message thread was short, but every word felt heavy. I saw the report about your case. What you described, it sounds like something I went through too. My throat tightened. Another line. My parents didn't call it rent, but they took money, controlled everything, said it was for my own good. Then, I never kept records. I wish I had. A silence moment. I sat down slowly on the edge of the bed. Because suddenly, this wasn't just about proving what happened to me. This was about something bigger. Something I didn't understand yet. Should I reply? I asked. Mrs. Alvarez didn't hesitate. Oh, yes. My hands hovered over the screen for a second. What do you even say to something like that? To someone who might have lived something similar, but never got out. I typed slowly. Hi, I'm Eva. Can you tell me what happened? I stared at the message, then pressed send. Background music, quiet tension, waiting. The reply came faster than I expected. Almost like they had been waiting. My name is Rachel. Rachel. A real name. A real person. Not just a message anymore. We talked for hours. Not on the phone. Not face to face. Just messages. Back and forth. And with every line she sent, my stomach sank deeper. Because the details, they were different. But the pattern was the same. They made me pay for everything, she wrote. School supplies, food, even electricity in my room. Another message. If I didn't pay, they'd cut things off. Internet lights, sometimes they'd just ignore me. My chest tightened because I knew that silence, that controlled absence, that feeling of being managed. How old were you? I asked. 13. Younger than me. Did they ever explain why? I asked. There was a pause. Then, they said it was to make me strong. I closed my eyes. Same words. Different house. Same system. Did anyone know? I typed. No. Why not? Another pause. Longer this time. Then, because I thought it was normal. Silence. I put the phone down slowly. Because that line, that one line, it echoed everything I had ever felt, everything I had ever questioned, everything I had ever doubted about myself. I thought it was normal. Background music, slow emotional build. That's the real damage. Not just what happens, but what you believe about it. Because if you think it's normal, you don't fight it, you don't question it, you just survive it. Eva, Mrs. Alvarez's voice pulled me back. What did she say? I looked up at her, and for a second, I didn't know how to explain it. Because how do you tell someone, this isn't just about me anymore? She went through something similar, I said quietly. Mrs. Alvarez's expression changed. Similar how? I hesitated, then said, not exactly the same, but close enough. That night, I couldn't stop thinking. Not about my parents, not about the case, but about Rachel, and the possibility that there were more. The next morning, I called Daniel. He answered quickly. Eva, everything okay? I didn't waste time. I think there are others. There was a pause. What do you mean? I got a message. Someone saw the coverage and reached out. She described something really similar. Another pause. Longer this time. Then, can you send me the conversation? Oh, yes. I forwarded everything. Every message. Every detail. Then I waited. Background music, quiet suspense building slowly. Hours passed. Then my phone rang. Same number. Daniel again. But this time, his voice was different. Tighter. More focused. Eva, this might be bigger than we thought. My chest tightened. How big? He exhaled slowly. We've already had 2 more inquiries this morning. I sat down. Slowly. Because that number, it wasn't just one anymore. It wasn't just Rachel. 2 more, I repeated. Oh, yes. What did they say? Similar patterns, financial control, structured payments, just under different names. Different names. A same system. I felt something shift inside me again. Not fear. Not exactly. Something else. Something sharper. What happens now? I asked. Daniel didn't hesitate. We expand the scope. Scope. Another word that made everything feels bigger. More official. More serious. This could indicate a pattern, he continued. Not necessarily coordinated, but similar behaviors across multiple households. Is that common? I asked. It's not unheard of, he said carefully, but documented cases like this, especially with this level of structure, are rare. Rare, but not unique. Background music, slow rise, realization hitting. I looked at the wall across from me, but I wasn't really seeing it. Because my mind was somewhere else. Connecting things, understanding things, realizing things. All those years, all that planning, all that structure, it wasn't random, and it wasn't isolated. Eva, Daniel said, pulling me back. Oh, yes, we may need you to speak about this more publicly. My stomach dropped. Publicly, Oh, yes. Like interviews. Possibly. A silence moment. I looked down at my hands. Because suddenly, this wasn't just about telling the truth anymore. It was about becoming the face of it. I don't know if I can do that, I said quietly. And for the first time since everything started, I felt unsure. Not about what happened, but about what came next. That's okay, Daniel said. There's no pressure, but your case, it's already making people come forward. Come forward. Those words stayed with me because I knew what that took. The fear, the doubt, the risk. I'll think about it, I said. That's all we're asking. After the call ended, I sat there for a long time, just thinking about 14-year-old me, standing in that kitchen, holding that first rent paper, believing I had no choice. And now, somewhere out there, there were other versions of that girl, still living it, still believing it, still thinking, this is normal. Background music softens emotional tension. I picked up my phone again, opened the message thread with Rachel, and typed, "You're not alone anymore." She replied almost instantly, "And neither are you." A silence. But just as I started to feel something close to clarity, my phone buzzed again. Another message. Different number. Unknown. I opened it, and what I read made my entire body go cold. I know what your parents did. A pause. Then, and I know something you don't. I know what your parents did. And I know something you don't. I stared at the message. My fingers hovered over the screen, but I didn't type. Didn't move. Because something about it felt different. Not like Rachel. Not like the others. This wasn't someone reaching out for help. This was someone who already knew. Heartbeat slow, heavy. Mrs. Alvarez noticed my face immediately. What happened? I handed her the phone without a word. She read it. Her expression shifted. That's not the same, she said quietly. I nodded. I know. I sat down slowly. My mind was racing now. Fast. Too fast. Because this message didn't ask anything. Didn't explain anything. It claimed something. I know what your parents did. That could mean anything. But the second line, and I know something you don't. That's what made my chest tighten. Because I had already uncovered so much. The payments, the plan, the accounts, the reporting. What could possibly be left? I typed back, carefully. Who is this? 3 dots appeared instantly. They were typing, then stopped, then started again, like they were choosing their words very carefully. Finally, you don't remember me. Silence. My stomach dropped. Because that sentence, it felt personal. Too personal. I think you have the wrong number, I replied. Seconds passed. Then, no, I don't. Another pause. Then, I used to come to your house. Background music, slow, creeping tension. My grip tightened around the phones. Come to my house. Who? When? Why didn't I remember? Who are you? I typed again. This time, the reply took longer. Much longer. And when it came, it changed everything. My name is Jason. The name hit me like a faint echo. Not clear, not sharp, just distant, like something buried deep. You used to babysit me. Heartbeat faster now. I froze. Babysit. I never babysat regularly. Just once or twice. Wait, a memory flickered. Quick, blurry. A small boy sitting on the floor of our living room. Cartoons playing quietly. Me in the kitchen. My mom talking in the background. Money on the counter. I sat up straight. Jason. Oh, yes. My throat went dry. How did you get my numbers? Doesn't matter. That answer didn't sit right. Not at all. What do you mean you know something? I asked. This time, the reply came slowly. Like he was thinking. Like he was deciding how much to reveal. I remember what your parents used to say when you weren't in the room. A silence moment. My chest tightened again. What did they say? Three dots. Pause. Then, they didn't call it rent. My fingers stiffened. They called it phase two. Background music, sudden low drop. I stopped breathing. Phase two. What does that mean? I typed quickly. No response. Seconds passed. Then, they said you were performing above expectations. My stomach twisted. They said if it worked, they could scale it. Scale it. That word didn't belong in a family. It belonged in business, in systems, in something planned. My hands were shaking now. Scale what? Another pause. Longer this time. Then, you. Heartbeat loud. I stood up. Too fast. The room spun slightly. Because suddenly, everything I thought I understood wasn't enough. This wasn't just control. This wasn't just money. This wasn't just a messed up way of parenting. This was something else. Something structured. Something repeatable. Something intentional. Jason, I typed, my fingers trembling, what exactly do you remember? The reply came slowly. Piece by piece. I was in the living room. You were in your room. Your parents were talking. Another message. They said you were proof it could work. My chest felt tight, like something heavy was pressing against it. They said most kids resist, but you didn't. Another pause.